Political debate manipulated public fears about the so-called black menace. Old stereotypes were adapted to the new politics. Increasingly, blacks were identified as brutes.
The states and people that favor this equality and amalgamation of the white and black races, God will exterminate. A man cannot commit so great an offense against his race, against his country, against his God, as to give his daughter in marriage to a Negro, a beast.
This climate of racial hysteria was seen in every aspect of popular culture.
The best example of this was in the writings of Thomas Dixon. In his novel, The Klansman, which then later became a hit Broadway play, and was finally adapted as the most successful of early American motion pictures, The Birth of a Nation.
Described by President Woodrow Wilson as history writ in lightning, Birth of a Nation captured on film the classic caricature of blacks following Reconstruction. Here, emancipation was viewed as a tragic mistake. It had ended slavery and let loose blacks' wildest passions. Brute Negroes played by whites in blackface pursued white virgins. These images were guaranteed to incite racial violence, but more, they justified it.
Earlier, we wouldn't have gotten an image of a brute Negro because this wouldn't have helped in the defense of slavery. To suggest earlier too much that there were people who were very, very rebellious would have suggested that the blacks wanted to be free. The image that they needed was that the blacks were docile in antebellum times. During Reconstruction, the black is a challenge to the political system, and they have to not only then try to justify maybe a reason for going back to slavery, but they also are justifying their reasons for killing the blacks. Because they're saying that the blacks are an offense to civilization.
These beings must be controlled, is what the mythology is telling us. And at the same time, in a very clever way, I think because it wants, the planters also wanted to soothe people, wanted to make sure that they believed that their society could continue. They harken back to the good old days when everybody's happy, the happy darky. A way of saying, let's go back to those times. Remember those good old times when?
Oh, there was an old darky and they call him Uncle Ned. But he died long ago, long ago. And he had no wool on the top of his head, in the place where the wool ought to grow. Then lay down the shovel and the hoe, and hang up the fiddle and the bow. No more hard work for poor Ned. He's gone where the good darkies go.
The older generation were the faithful retainers of the slave era, and the newer generation, however, was out of control. The blacks who had grown up in the period since the Civil War and had never known the domesticating influence of slavery.
So you have this two-pronged attack on blacks. On one hand, they reduced the servile, harmless, singing darkies of the good old times before the Civil War, where we really want to go back to. And you have an attack on supposedly what they've become now, vicious, brutal, aggressive, violent.
America at the turn of the century experienced unprecedented race hatred. Violence, Jim Crow segregation, mob terror became acceptable methods of social control. And always to justify such atrocity was the excuse of the animalistic black brute. Brute caricatures of black children, or pickaninnies as they were once called, showed them as victims. Victims who evoked not sympathy, but the feeling that blacks were subhuman.
They're always on the river, on the ground, in a tree, partially clad, dirty, their hair unkempt. This suggests that there was a need to imagine black children as animal-like, as savage. If you do that, if you make that step and say that these children are really like little furry animals, then it's much easier to justify the threat that's embodied in having an alligator pursuing the child.
Seven little niggers playing tag with bricks. One was it most all the time, then there was but six. 6 little niggers.
One by one, black children disappeared, targets of comic violence. The symbolism in these images was revealing.
5 little niggers playing there was war.
Material objects tell us that there was still a segment of the population at large that was very uncomfortable with the black presence in the New World and needed to get rid of them, artistically rendering a way of removing blacks so that there's nothing left.
One little nigger in the scorching sun. Soon there was the smell of smoke, and then there was none.